Hey guys, my name's Colin Ledbetter. This is the Build Different podcast. In studio with me today, I have Barb O'Connor. Barb is the wife of injured officer Ryan O'Connor. Ryan was shot in 2017. He worked for Arnold Police Department. So I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to see you. It always
Mhm.
takes me back to how we first met, or at
Yep.
least how I was introduced to your family.
Yep.
So, love getting to see you. It is just great to be here and see you. So, thanks for having me.
Barb actually met my mother and my father the day that I was shot. She was actually in the hospital with Ryan, correct? He was actually, was it COVID at
COVID.
the time? He had COVID, and they took it upon themselves, them and you and someone else from Police Wives, right? It was Shannon. Actually came down to see my family while all of that was going on with hers. So I just wanted to highlight that a little bit because it's amazing. Especially what Police Wives, Backstoppers, any of those kind of organizations, what they do, and for us, for first responders, and when we're injured, especially. So it was a big deal. I know it meant a lot to my family that day. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank you. We think about your mom and dad very often. Again, we just love your story and that you're sitting here with us today. So, it's really my honor to be here. Thank you.
Appreciate that. So let's just kind of jump right into it. I would definitely want to talk about Police Wives in a bit, but let's talk about Backstoppers. They've obviously helped you guys and been there kind of through the walk.
Yes. You mentioned how I was introduced to your family. With my sort of going back in time, many years of being involved in the Police Wives Association, we are often called when there's an officer who's injured or killed in the line of duty. And during that time, things can be hectic, obviously for the police department because they've got people everywhere. They've usually got an active investigation going on. They're worrying about many, many different things. And although they always do a great job at everything they have to tackle, a lot of times the family just needs somebody who can be there for them. So a lot of times as a police wife, we're the first people who are called to come in and be with the family just to make sure, hey, does anyone need a ride? Do we need to arrange for people to be brought in? Do you have kids? Do you have dogs? Do you have things? Do you need us to go buy anything for you? Sometimes it's arranging, a place to stay while we're kind of waiting things out. So having that exposure and that experience in my background, that is actually how I was first introduced to the Backstoppers. Being at the hospital in those critical times when families are faced with so many unknowns and so many big life-changing questions, it's great to have the Backstoppers come in and to be able to see the families be introduced to the Backstoppers because they do provide immediate assistance. I think a lot of people hear about the Backstoppers because they know Guns and Hoses, the big charity boxing event that happens every year that's, thankfully sold out almost every year, and they raise tons of money, and it's great entertainment for the night before Thanksgiving. I know that we all have been and enjoyed it, myself included, for many years before I became a recipient of the benefits that Backstoppers provides. But although that's a great and fun night and it's such an amazing cause and it's really their biggest fundraiser of the year, a lot of people don't see behind the scenes. They don't know what happens with the Backstoppers and what the Backstoppers actually does or how they function, how they interact with the family. So, I can share, like I said, what I've seen in the past with other families. I always thought, God, this is just amazing. But I hope that's never me. I think we all say that if you're in any law enforcement family, first responder family, you're always hoping you never need that help. And when you go to the barbecues and the charity events that they do and the fundraisers they do and the Guns and Hoses, you're spending your money and you know what it's meant for, but you never imagine you're going to be that family. I mean, I think you and I can both say that now.
Yep.
So when Ryan was injured, to be completely honest, kind of historically, the Backstoppers was really more more there for families when an officer was killed in the line of duty. That's really for many, many, many years. That was when they would step in, is when an officer was killed in the line of duty. Yes. So when Ryan, my husband, was shot in 2017, they had just started, just in the year or two before that, they had just started to help with catastrophically injured police officers who were either 100% totally and permanently disabled, or faced such challenges that they were never going to be able to return to duty, even if they want to. And in that instance, I found myself at the hospital the day that Ryan was shot. It was the middle of the afternoon. It was obviously a crazy scene. You know how it goes. I mean, there were police everywhere, probably 200 police officers lining the hallways, filling the waiting rooms. Some were there with me. Some were helping with my kids. It was just a crazy time. And, it's amazing the things that you experience in that moment where you're literally seeing your life is changed. And before you even know what a prognosis is, before you even know what 10 minutes from now is going to look like, you're already thinking, how am I going to pay the mortgage? Oh my God, if he can't return to work and I'm a stay-at-home mom to 4 kids, how are we going to have insurance? How are we going to pay for everything that it takes to raise 4 kids?
Absolutely.
So that's just a hard, honest truth. And when I found myself in that moment, I really didn't know what I was going to do. I was so overwhelmed. And of course, you're scattered, you're pulled a million different directions, you're scatterbrained. And in my case, Ryan was rushed into emergency surgery. We had no idea if he was going to make it through the surgery. Obviously, Ryan was shot in the head, and it was a really grave situation. And when I came in and they said to me, hey, he may never walk again, never talk again, never breathe on his own. He may never understand anything that's being said to him. And by the way, that's if he even wakes up. That's if he even makes it through this surgery. So, you're just hit like a freight train with these million different things. And so, of course, there's shock, there's awe, and then it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So Ryan went into that surgery, and he was in that surgery for several hours. Thank God he made it through that surgery. And, I found myself sitting in this waiting area as they were restabilizing him in the intensive care unit. And I was sitting with some family members and some close friends. And I remember thinking, like, wow, I have so many questions, and there are going to be so many things that I need. And then sort of the weight of knowing that he had the most serious injury, that you could face. Less than a 1% chance of survival. Not a good prognosis. And even if, as I mentioned, the list of things that would be challenges, and knowing he's not going to come home. This isn't a broken leg. It's not going to be 6 weeks from now and then we just jump right back in the saddle. This is going to be round the clock care. It's going to be tons of rehab, maybe lots of medications, lots of equipment and things that would assist in his daily care. So just facing what it was going to take to care for Ryan was crushing, because you don't know what you don't know. And if you haven't lived it, you can't know. So that was hard. But then also, looking at my kids at the time, they were 4, 6, 11, and 17, and I was a stay-at-home mom and thinking, okay, how am I going to do this? So, sitting in that waiting room when he made it through this initial life-saving surgery, and starting to just brain dump. I have all of these things. I'm so overwhelmed. And, my best friends were there with a notepad, and they started making lists and writing down my questions. And we were just kind of putting it all out there. And I remember coming out of that waiting room just after we'd made that list. And I looked over in the corner of the waiting room, and very quietly, keeping to themselves, I saw Chief Ron Battelle and Chief Jim Silvernail, who has since passed, unfortunately. But at the time, those two were off in the corner. And there were a lot of people coming up to me, a lot of people wanting to comfort me, wanting to offer support. And it was just a really busy, overwhelming time. But when people started to kind of fall away for a few minutes, Chief Silvernail and Chief Battelle came over to me and handed me an envelope. And I thought, what is it? I was shocked to see them, first of all. And to be completely honest, when I saw Chief Patel, my initial thought was not, hey, they're here to help my family. It was, Ryan came from a law enforcement family, and I know that Chief Patel knew Ryan's dad. And then also Chief Patel, a lot of people don't know this, but Chief Patel was the first person to give Ryan a job in law enforcement. He hired him in 1997 with St. Louis County Police. So I also knew that was something that was a deep bond. They were connected. And I knew that Chief Patel would be there no matter what, but I never dreamed he was there representing Backstoppers. So they pulled me aside, and I remember him pulling an envelope out of his jacket pocket. And he said, we're praying for you. We're here for you. He said, this is for you to do whatever you need for your family. No questions asked, no strings attached. He said, just do whatever you need. He said, we don't ask. We just want to make sure you're taken care of. And of course, in that moment, I was so overwhelmed and just like, wow, this is incredible. I had no idea what was in the envelope, obviously. But I mean, I'm not kidding when I tell you that show of support, and then just the hugs and the encouragement, and they didn't leave then. They stayed. And they were watching, and they were waiting, and they were ready for anything that I would raise my hand and say that I needed. They were going to make sure it was taken care of. But when they walked away, and I remember it being really late that night, I think I, reached into my bag and pulled that envelope out, and I was like, oh my gosh, I already forgot about this, So I pulled it out and I opened it up and I looked at it, and I remember just crying and thinking, okay, this is going to help me until we figure out what comes next. Yeah. So that was my first introduction personally, to the Backstoppers and to being a recipient of their benefits.
I think it's imperative, you definitely shed the light on it, but I know my family experienced the same thing. They just show up, they're there, they silently provide what you need, and that's what it is. That's literally down to the bare bones what Backstoppers is. They just show up and make sure you have everything you need and make sure everything's taken care of.
Absolutely. And for us, our journey has been very long. Obviously, Ryan's injury, again, is very complex, and there's a lot that goes into keeping him going and making sure he's healthy and that he is reaching his full potential. And, I mean, of course, that very first day, it's been scary for 7 years, but that very first day was really overwhelming, and it just got increasingly more challenging because the care that Ryan required was something that those involved in his care decided, hey, we really think that he should go to Colorado. They have the best brain injury rehab there. They also have a great spinal cord injury program at the rehab hospital he went to. But, here I am, it's December. My oldest son was smack dab in the middle of his senior year of high school. And my little one was going to be starting kindergarten later in that year, and trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to, how am I going to take 4 kids and Ryan and move to Colorado and function in any kind of normal capacity? How are we going to do this? And then financially, I mean, the cost of living in other places is not what it is here in St. Louis. Yeah. And I remember just being terrified. We had to still pay our mortgage and pay all of our, utilities and things for our home. But then here we are uprooting, and the travel expenses involved and the housing expenses involved and all of the things that go into just uprooting your life. Yeah. and moving, and with kids. Kids are very expensive. So, again, Backstoppers and I can't say this enough. I mean, they were there every minute just saying, whatever you need. If there's anything you need, let us know. What can we help with? So they were a huge part in us being able to relocate and to make that as smooth of a transition as we could for the kids. So some of the things that a lot of people have never heard are things like when we moved there, I was having to shuttle everyone around and be present at the hospital and be a part of these therapies and be a part of the planning for Ryan's care. And so trying to juggle all of that, the best thing we could do was put our kids in this one particular school that was a great school, and it was very, very close, so that I could manage the schedule and the demands of that schedule for Ryan. So the Backstoppers called and said, hey, have you figured out school for the kids? And I'm like, well, there's a school, but it's a private school, and I don't know that I can swing the tuition for all of this. And they said, give me the number to the school. And we hung up, and I remember, I believe somebody from Backstoppers called out there and spoke with the secretary and arranged and paid the tuition. That is something that I can't even describe. I mean, that was like £1,000,000 off my shoulders. My kids needed to have school and a safe place and a good place and a place to be kids and learn and still continue all the normal things. And that was one of the first big things they did. But kind of moving through the progression of Ryan's recovery, when we got to, he was injured in December, and we went to Colorado in January. And when we were wrapping up in Colorado, it was around June. And instead of just coming on back home and starting normal life again, we were being sent to another location, which was actually in Omaha, Nebraska. And one of the quirky things about, on-duty injuries, line-of-duty injuries, is that the way that insurance works is they take care of some things, but they don't take care of everything. And in our case, they would take care of Ryan, but they would not take care of the expense of moving our kids again. So, that was another thing Backstoppers helped with. And around that time was when we had to start figuring out Ryan's retirement. We had to figure out, he can't stay on the books because he's obviously been declared totally and permanently disabled, can't return to duty. So at that point, we were trying to figure out, myself and the police department, we're going through like, okay, how do we retire him, and what is that going to look like, and what do we have to do for this process? And during that process was when we realized, wait a second, myself and 4 kids are going to have no insurance. And that's terrifying.
It is.
Terrifying. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there watching, your podcast that have experienced what it's like to go without insurance, or to have something happen unexpectedly and you are not financially prepared. It is crippling. And I was terrified. I was so upset. I did not know how I was going to figure out insurance for our kids. And it was right about then that the Backstoppers said, no, we got you. We will take care of you, and we will take care of your insurance, your medical, your dental, your vision. If you have out-of-pocket expenses like prescription costs, co-payments, co-insurance, anything that you need, we're going to take care of. And, not to jump around, but Ryan, I know that you know this, but for your viewers, in 2022, Ryan was diagnosed with severe COVID. And he ended up hospitalized. And when I say severe, I mean the most severe. He ended up hospitalized. He had to be on a ventilator. He actually had to go on ECMO. And he spent 4 months in the hospital. A lot of that was in intensive care. And then after that, I wanted so bad just to bring him home. But because he already had a lot of physical limitations and a lot of mobility issues before the COVID happened, we faced challenges already. And then the COVID just wiped him out back to zero. He couldn't sit up. He couldn't do anything on his own. And I wanted so bad for him to come home. But even with help, even with having nursing or home health come in, we just couldn't swing it. It was not safe for him. And at that point, as heartbroken as I was about it, we were forced to have him go to a rehabilitation center. And I don't know if anyone else has ever tried to put at the time he was, 48 years old, into a rehab center, but they don't take you if you're under a certain age. They have rules. And again, new challenges we had no idea about. So we searched and finally found a place that would allow him in and work with him and rehab him and get him back to baseline. But they're very, very, very expensive. And so at that point, the Backstoppers again stepped up and said, no, just get him there. It's the one place that will take him, and it's a great place, and they can help him rehab so that he can come home. That is what we want for you guys. We will take care of it. I'm not going to say how much that cost, but it was a lot of money. Yeah. And furthermore, when his case with COVID finally wrapped up, 6 long months of hospital stays and ICUs and ambulance ride and ECMO and ventilators and rehab facilities, when I received the billing for that COVID experience, not even counting the rehabilitation center, just the hospitalization alone, they billed over $1.1 million in care for him. It's no joke. And that was not covered by his workers' comp insurance. That was not covered because of his injury.
Yeah.
We would have been ruined. It would have ruined my life if I didn't have the financial support. And it's things like that that I think people take for granted. They don't realize why the Backstoppers are so important, because I think a lot of people see kind of the, I'll call it fluff in the beginning, where it's like, oh, everybody, buying the t-shirt and buying the wristband, and it's amazing. And it's so kind of people to do that. But again, when you're talking about $1 million for one medical event, and I know you know this, I know you've had such major complex things go on in your own life that you know exactly what I'm talking about, but a lot of people don't, and they don't realize that, again, the first 6 months, the first year, that support is just booming. It's amazing. And then after that, it kind of disappears, if you will, or it dwindles, and rightfully so. I understand there are more people that get injured. There are other things that people turn their focus to, and that's okay. But if we don't have a program like the Backstoppers, families like ours would never survive this. It would just ruin us financially, emotionally, the stress, the drain, because you never stop needing things. The need never goes away.
Yeah.
And so the things that you need to just thrive, really, the financial support, the insurance help, basically anything you can think of. And for me personally, a huge one, I look at my kids and I look at what they've been through, and I look at the sacrifice they have had to make, and the moving around, and not getting to be kids. And that's really hard. And it's devastating that your kids have to go through it. But having the Backstopper say, I know you've lost a lot of opportunities, and I know you've lost a lot of things that kids should just naturally have, the security and the normalcy. But when they step up and say, your kids are so smart and they deserve to go to the best schools, and we will cover that tuition for you, that changes their lives.
It does.
It changes their opportunities. It changes their future. It changes their outlook on everything, because they don't feel like, if only I could do this, if only I could go here, if only I had this opportunity. It changes the way they look at the world. And those experiences, I think, are so critical for our Backstoppers kids. And there's no way, let's just face it, there's no way that financially us families could ever financially, support all that goes into taking care of someone who's injured, or just in the event of an officer's death, picking up and just moving ahead in life is not what people think it is. You got to figure everything out all over again.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I've experienced, since I've been shot and stuff, I've kind of gotten to the back end of Backstoppers a little bit with some stuff. It's kind of funny what you think about when you start seeing these programs at work and stuff. I went through a couple of line of duty deaths while I was with the department as an officer. But here recently, I went through one as a medically retired officer, seeing what Backstoppers do and everything like that. I remember showing up to the hospital, and my first thought was, is Backstoppers here? And I don't even know why I thought it, because it took me an hour to get there. Of course they're there. And they were. And I found the first person, and they were already there. Yeah. And they were taking care of things, and they were doing what they do. They were, standing there waiting for the family to say, we need this, we need that. And it's just amazing that there is a system like that, especially in this area, that will help the family if they need it.
Yes. And exactly what you just said. I can tell you from my experience, we obviously are here from St. Louis, but as I mentioned, we had to move to Denver. We moved to Omaha. We moved to Tampa. We went back to Denver a couple of more times. And I will say that many of these cities and many of these police departments and fire departments, they do have, a benevolent association, or they have, a wives group, or they have these groups that really do offer support and good support. But when you get that experience firsthand, where you are all over the country and you see there's literally nothing like Backstoppers anywhere else you go, there's just not. No. It really makes me appreciate even more what we have with the Backstoppers here. And, another thing that I think is really important for people to know is, even for me, having been involved in a lot of the first responder, critical incidents over the years where there's assistance that's needed, I never really understood how the Backstoppers thrives, besides guns and hoses, which is, of course, a huge thing. But what gets overlooked, and I wish there was more attention drawn to this, are the volunteers. Yeah. And I know that you and I have seen it at the barbecue. We've seen it behind the scenes at Guns and Hoses, but I wish that the people who are the lifeblood of the Backstoppers and go to these events and organize these events. I know you had Mike Sims on recently. He's a prime example. I don't know how that guy does anything else in life because he's so gung-ho about Backstoppers and all of their events. And
he is.
There are so many people like that volunteer what feels like darn near every waking minute of their free time, to put on these functions. And it could be for the young Backstoppers. It could be for a barbecue, a car wash, just a social event. They do so many things. And I think that those volunteers are incredible people. And, of course, some of them have very close ties to law enforcement or fire departments, paramedics. But a lot of them don't. They're just good people in this community who say, I have found a way to help and I feel really called to do this. And I love each and every one of those people, even if I haven't been able to meet tons of them. The ones I've met, I feel like I can never stop saying thank you.
Yeah, there's definitely, they've got an algorithm somehow of people that will just keep that place going. Yeah. It's amazing. And obviously, I mean, dropping just $1 million on something, right. and they're just ready to do that. They come in, they step in, and they will make sure that kids go to school, especially for fallen officers and stuff. It's imperative that, especially for fallen officers, but also injured officers and stuff, that their families don't have to worry about that anymore. Absolutely. It's very important. Yes. So. Anything else?
I would just add, too, that I think a lot of people aren't familiar with exactly how much the Backstoppers do when it comes to line of duty deaths. Yeah. That's something that just amazes me every time I see it. The way that they care for and comfort families, and not just financially, but the heart that goes into, or the heart behind, rather, the things that they do, and the thoughtfulness and the calls just to check in, and knowing everyone's names, and knowing, where the kids go to school, and knowing things about your family. It's just so invaluable. And the way that they meticulously plan a funeral, they make sure that the families have clothing, that the families have transportation, that the families have anything that they need to get through that first, critical transition of, hey, my officer's gone. And then all that they do with helping pay off mortgages and pay off debt. And, if they need help with anything else, it's just there, and it doesn't go away.
Yeah. It's crazy to even think that they would be able to help map that out. And I think that's not only the money aspect, but the mapping that they help in constructing these families back to what at least would be semi-normal. Yes. Is important to make sure that the family doesn't crumble after that person is lost.
Absolutely. For me personally, too, another thing that the Backstoppers did, a couple of things that they did that I think are really important for me to share to you. My oldest son, he's now 24. He's a federal police officer now. But when he was a little bit younger, he decided to go into the police academy, and they funded his police academy experience. He did become a policeman locally, actually at Arnold. And we had a little bit of a scary time. The same year that Ryan had COVID, I'm pretty sure the universe was trying to kill me. But the same year that Ryan had COVID, my oldest son actually had to leave policing for a short time because they discovered that he had a heart defect, congenital heart problem. And he had to undergo heart surgery that same year that Ryan had COVID. And they took care of all of that. They took care of making sure that he was able to get his surgery and get things corrected so that he could return to police work. And with their help and him being able to get healthy and have those surgeries done, like I said, he's now back into policing. So
I think that's a testament right there. That's from day one to day infinity. So,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, Barb, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's great to see you.